Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. You're watching the March Madness episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, and we're not talking basketball. We're talking about the madness on Airline Drive. Over the next hour, we will talk a lot of New Orleans Saints. Your phone calls are invited, and as always, man, I can tell you, a great guest for you tonight. Always enjoy having him. Mike Detillier of WWL Radio, and so much more. Mike, welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you,
Always
Eric.
great to have you, Mike. Really, it is. And before we get started, I gotta let the folks know a little bit about what's going on with you. I mean, you got your hands in a lot of things, and I know people are chomping at the bit waiting on that draft book.
Yeah, we'll have it out around the first week of April, around April 7th or 8th. It should be out in that range. And so we're working. I've got most of it done. It's just editing the final pieces of it. And I try to hold on to it as much as I can until the final kind of print day, because so many changes can happen. That happens every day now, and what it affects the draft and draft status and everything else. So
yes.
It'll be out 7th or 8th of April, and I'll be glad when it's over with.
Right. Mike, can you throw a phone number out there?
They can go on to saintsreport.com, MikeDetillier.com, and order it, and we'll ship it out first class. You'll get it in a day or so.
It's the Bible, folks. I've been getting it for years and years and years, and until Katrina, I had a stack of them at my house and never threw them away. And again, always a good publication.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Mike, let's get started. The big news, obviously, with the New Orleans Saints was Jimmy Graham being traded to Seattle along with a number 4 pick for Max Unger. They get the 31st pick back. First of all, your thoughts on that deal?
Well, you know, last year when we were doing this show, so many people said, well, why don't you trade him and get 2 first-round picks in exchange? Well, basically, that's what you got. Last time I was on the show, and this has been since midseason, that they had to address the center cornerback position first in free agency. So via trade, you get the center position fixed with Max Unger. I think he's one of the 2 top centers in the NFC, along with Andy Frederick with the Cowboys. Max was hurt a little bit last year, but I just look at what he did to anchor that line for Seattle. Terrific run blocker, really good pass protector. Now, he's tall for a center. Now, he's 6'5", and that was the thing brought up a lot with Russell Wilson. He's 5'10" cornerback. Would he disrupt the view of it? Because I work with a couple former quarterbacks. First thing is, I don't like a 6'5" center. But he worked at that with Wilson to make sure that wasn't going to be an issue, never was. I spoke to a former Seattle Seahawk assistant coach who told me he's the smartest player I've ever been around. But even better than that, he's a great communicator. And I think at that center position, you have to be. One of the things physically, though, you have to be able, on one play, to have a 330-pound nose guard right on top of you, power guy. And in the next play, a defensive end shoved inside to get pass rush on you. So you're playing the power and the speed. Carl Dunbar was the first one who really spelled it out last year. I did your show right after that. Blow up the launch pad. And that's what every team's going to do to the Saints. Every team's going to try to do to Denver. Every team's going to try to do to New England. Attack the middle. I think at that time, I think he told me that center guard, I think it's soft for the Saints. We were going after him. Now, everybody didn't have the Jets personnel to do it, but everybody did the exact same thing. Unger fixes that problem, and he gets you an extra first-round pick in which you can address the need, a need position. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit more, but for the Saints to get back to the position of being a playoff contender, you got to repeat 2006. Nothing energizes a football team better than a really good young quarterback and a core group of young players to win with. This team hasn't picked well on draft day.
Agreed.
06, 13, everything else has been below average in those drafts. You have to hit again like you did in 06. Think about it. You had Reggie Bush, Roman Harper, Jari Evans, Marcus Colston, Zach Strief. Now, Rob Ninkovich didn't do a lot here, but he made it big somewhere else. And he had a draft day trade that you acquired Jeff Fain, a starting center, Hollis Thomas. And look what it did to your football team. It was the catalyst that put you to 2 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl run. You've got to be able to hit big come draft day. We can talk about the free agents, and they're vital to this team. But if you don't win in late April and the early part of May, you're back to 7-9, 8-8.
Couldn't agree with you more. You got to throw the undrafted free agents in there as well in 06, like Pierre Thomas, that helped him out a lot. And Mike, that's where they've hit gold. Undrafted free agents, as you mentioned, 06-13, an average of 2 players in every other draft that this regime has been in that made an impact on this team. And you just can't win doing that. Now, it's been overshadowed because they've had some undrafted free agents that have made an impact that maybe have lessened the fact that the draft has really not hit. But I agree with you. This has got to be one of those drafts where you got to hit on almost every single pick.
The blocks of 06 were there all the way up until last year.
Yes.
And even Drew Brees. I mean, that's the situation there. Drew has carted this team on his back, all those years. No matter how you cut it, he's been the guy. You don't have him, you maybe win 3 or 4 games at the most. So, again, you got to go back to hitting on draft day. I like the trade because, again, it puts you in a position late in the first round that if I'm the Saints, I'm telling everybody, I'm picking Bryce Petty from Baylor because I want somebody to blink. Man, listen, just because I tell you don't mean I got to do it.
That's right.
But you know what? I'm not trying to win the presidential election or the Senate. I'm looking for one team to blink, especially early in round 2. I think the Titans are a team that I would target. The Bears are another team because I look at the Titans, they're not going to pick Marcus at 2. They're going to go with Leonard Williams, okay? So unless Jameis Winston gets in trouble, which is a possibility, he's going to Tampa.
Yes.
If I'm Tennessee, I pick Leonard Williams, and I hope with that early second, I come back and I pick Bryce Petty. If I'm the Saints, I tell them, you know what, you're going to have to make a deal with us for Bryce Petty. So maybe I can get a little movement. I swing down a few picks. I get an extra selection. You get your guy, I get an extra pick.
Yes.
When I only have 20 guys ranked as first-round picks in this draft class. But boy, what I got a lot of is second and third-round picks from 21 to in the 60s. Those numbers are close.
Really?
Really close. So that tells me the meat of this draft, second, third, and just a little trail over into the 4th round. So that's where I want picks accumulated. So if I could get an extra drop down, I would have 2 seconds. I'd probably have an extra third. I already got an extra third in the Kenny Stills deal, and I've got a 4th, so to speak, because of the situation. I traded the 4th off to Jimmy Graham, but I got 2 5s.
You got 2 5s.
So I want to hit on those early picks, but I lie through my teeth and tell people I'm in love with Bryce Petty. He's my guy. They're his quarterback of the future.
Yes.
All I want is one team to blink, and I'll move down a little bit. This team has too many needs to pick a quarterback in the early rounds. You need a pass rushing outside linebacker. You need a defensive end. You need a wide receiver and a tight end, and help along the offensive line.
Absolutely. Mike, I've had so many fans ask me about why trade Jimmy Graham, and one of the things I've said is not just the cap number, but one of the few tradable assets on this team. They had to get better on the interior of the offensive line. Did you really want to take a chance on grooming a young center? And again, we still don't know what's going to happen with Jerry Evans. We'll talk about that later on. But what are your thoughts on why they traded Graham and the huge need of trying to upgrade the interior of that offensive line?
Well, I think that was a big part of it. You've upgraded your offensive line. But the other part, too, is, listen, no one knows this locker room better than Sean Payton. A lot of people that, like myself or print people or whatever, that, well, I think this, I think that, I think this. In my opinion, Jimmy became a bit of a distraction last year. At times, he seemed to sulk when he wasn't throwing the football.
Looked like
you just go back to his childhood, how he was raised, and certain issues, just kind of jumping from home to home to home. All of a sudden, he becomes an instant millionaire. But then when it comes down to the real cut, is it your wide receiver or tight end? My coach, who really put me at this spot, he testified against me. And you wonder a little bit about the makeup at that spot of Jimmy. He seemed to be a distracted player. Dropped more passes than he ever dropped before. A lot of almost disinterest on him on some part. He was still a good player, but guess what? I'm paying you as a great player. And he's caught more passes than any other tight end that's ever put on a helmet and a jockstrap to start an NFL career. And he's caught the second most touchdown passes. Only Rob Gronkowski has caught more. He's been productive, but last year, he was just a good player. He wasn't a great player. For this team to win, when you're paying out a lot of money, the guys you're paying a great amount of money to, they better play great. And I think it was maybe Sean's feeling, shake up of the locker room. Also, too, I get value for value. I think when you look at it, I get value for value. Not that Jimmy was a bad guy at any stretch, imagination, but chemistry in the locker room. Pete Carroll talks about it all the time, Eric, about people talk about leadership. And he says, you know, it's overrated. I took the second youngest team in the history of Super Bowls, and I won a championship with it. Where were my leaders? I had a few guys, but you know what it was all about? Chemistry and love for one another. I'm not going to let my guy down in a tough spot. I'm not going to let my guy down. And so I think for Sean, knowing this is a crossroads season for the NFL, for him in New Orleans, he had to shake up this roster. And one of the few assets he had that could get value was Jimmy, Kenny Stills, and he still has a player or two that possibly could be dangled out there to get value for.
Yes. Let's talk about the interior of the offensive line. Your thoughts on how much of an upgrade Unger is as opposed to Goodwin. Who moves into Ben Grubb's spot now at that guard position?
Well, if I had to play tomorrow, it'd be Tim Lolita.
Right.
But that's not going to be the case.
Right.
He's going to have some heavy competition there. This team has never under Loomis Payton picked an offensive lineman in round one. You got two this year. If you don't do it this year, you'll never do it.
Right.
Never do it. And so what I could see happening is if the pass rusher is not there at 13, which I suspect, you know, Randy Gregory's gone, Dante Fowler's gone, Vic Beasley's gone, Shane Ray's gone, all gone.
So you're looking at Bud Dupree at that point, right?
Bud Dupree, or do I pick the best offensive lineman? And it could then come down to a pick of Brandon Sheriff from Iowa, or my top-rated pure tackle, La'el Collins from LSU.
Who do you like out of those two?
You know what? Because he could play, I think Brandon Sheriff's a really good player.
So do I.
But I think he's an inside guy, similar to Zach Martin.
Yes.
La'el Collins, I could move him inside to guard for a year or two, and then, you know, when Zach Strief punches the retirement card, I put him at right tackle. I've always felt La'el was a right guy on the right side, a power player, great run blocker, much improved as a pass protector. Eric, I just think about Collins. LSU's passing game, and listen, I use the term mediocre, and I'm using it really generously on mediocre.
Yes.
You knew they were going to run the ball, and you knew they were going to run it predominantly left.
Yes.
And nobody stopped them. You could say, oh, Leonard Fournette's a great back. Well, yeah, he is, but you know what? He had some pretty good holes to run through. And La'el Collins was a big part of that. You just watch him. He was mashing people at the point of attack. I just go back to that Ole Miss game. The best front seven in college football at that time. They come there, chest poked out. You know, nobody did anything to us. At the end of that game, La'el Collins and Vidal Alexander were wearing them out on the left side. And so my thought would be if the pass rusher's not there, then I go for the offensive lineman that I can move to guard for a year and then swing him out to tackle.
Like I get it all the time, Saints don't like LSU players. They don't pick LSU players. What would set Collins apart from other players that have been on the board when the Saints have drafted?
I don't know about not liking. Sometimes it's just, you know, kind of who's there at that point.
This regime has only drafted Al Woods. And we know he was a bust.
Yeah, I knew
that was a reach.
In college.
Yeah, come on.
You know, it's peculiar. It really is.
Especially with that much talent.
With that much talent in the state.
And you know it.
And you know it. You should know it better than anybody.
That's right.
And you've passed on that. Only they could tell you exactly why you would pick a project player like Al Woods when you had other guys that were far more gifted athletically and
then just look at the
football-wise.
last few drafts. I mean, come on, how many players LSU has put into the NFL?
But I did tell you last year, if he would have been on the board in round two, Jeremy Hill would have been wearing the black and gold.
Yes.
And you know what? I got tipped off on that the day before the draft that, hey, listen, the Saints really like Jeremy Hill, and the boss likes Jeremy Hill. So, you know, and I knew who he meant when he said the boss likes Jeremy Hill. So I think in that part, sometimes it's timing, but, you know, only they could answer why. They have passed on a lot of LSU players. And so it'll be interesting in this draft. There aren't as many LSU players, but two guys would be two great fit players for them. One would be La'el Collins. The other one was Terrence McGee. You just got rid of Pierre Thomas. If you're looking for a guy who's a young Pierre Thomas, it's Terrence McGee. And you don't have to spend a high pick on him. You know, he'd be a 5th, 6th round pick for you. He can do the exact same thing that Pierre did, Terrence McGee can do.
Talk about Jerry Evans. What do you think his future is here? High cap number. There's been rumors that, first of all, the Saints were going to cut him. Then the Saints were going to try to renegotiate a deal with him, restructure a deal. There was a lot of talk that if he would have been released, that Buffalo was waiting in the wings for him. What do you think his future is here in New Orleans?
I think, if he stays here, it'll be under a restructured deal. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the key now. Do you take the restructure part of that deal? If not, I'm shocked that Kansas City would have given up a draft choice for Ben Grubbs. My thing is, it sounds a lot like Andy Reid, though. Andy does things unconventional. But my thing is, I knew eventually you're going to have to cut loose Ben Grubbs. Now, him being a free agent, you might have had other suitors. So, I give up a 5th-round pick for Grubbs. To me, of all the moves, that's the most surprising.
I agree with you.
That somebody would have given you up a 5th-round pick for a guy that you knew eventually you were going to have to cut.
Right.
So my thing with Jerry, if he stays on this football team, it'll either be under a restructured deal or you may have to cut bait with it. Somebody else is going to pay him a lot of money. So if I'm his agent, my thing is, you know what, man, I'm not taking that big of a pay cut. I can go play somewhere else right now. Someone else is going to pay me a lot of money. And he still has a lot of skill set. As an offensive guard, he's still a really good player. Now, he's a dominant run blocker. Where it slipped a little bit on him is in the pass protection part of the game.
But was that a byproduct of Goodwin not playing up to his capability and maybe the other guards having to compensate for Goodwin not playing 100%?
Well, I'm not going to throw Jonathan under the... Listen, it's all about age with Jonathan. He was hurt almost every week. And, you get old in this business. Bottom line, you get old in this business. And they took advantage of it. Here's my thing about, just slide Tim Lolito in. Well, if he couldn't beat out a 36-year-old Jonathan Goodwin, what makes you think he's going to take over today?
That's exactly what I've said since the beginning. If he couldn't beat him out, what makes you think that he's going to move right in either guard or center and going to be a productive player?
Unger deal makes all the sense in the world because now you protect the most prized possession on your team in Drew Brees, and you protect his launch pad, that he can step up in the pocket now. And that's something he couldn't do. The last 2 years, that pocket just blew up right inside of him. And again, if you don't fix it, guess what? Every team sees how another team played you. They're going to go right at you. Eric, all this stuff about, Sean Payton's going to change philosophy. He's going to be a more run-oriented coach. No way. He is what he is.
Right.
He's going to throw the football.
Yes,
what he wants a running game for, and really truly, is late in the game, seal the deal.
Yes.
Take time off the clock, kind of bury that opponent with the running game. They did that in 2009. They did it in 2011 with a really good offensive line. Now you've got to retool that offensive line. Only Armstead, under 30 years old, and if you're talking about a guy who's a blue chip player, now take Unger out of the mix because I think he's a gold chip player in the NFL. Armstead's it at this stage.
Yes.
He is your blue chip guy as far as not for just today, down the road.
Yes. Mike, Kenny Stills is traded. A 5th-round pick, had $1.3 million left on his deal over 2 years. When it was rumored, I kind of laughed because you don't get rid of a productive player who again, is cheap when you're in cap hell. But obviously, there were some issues within the locker room, some things off the field that they didn't like in terms of his maturity. And they get an opportunity to pick up a 3rd-round pick, and then they get a throw-in of Dannell Ellerbe. First of all, your thoughts on the trade, then tell us what type of player Ellerbe is going to be. In my research, it looks like he may fit the Saints defense more, be a better fit here than he was in Miami.
Yeah, I talked to Ed Reed about him when he was with the Ravens, and Ed was like, man, listen, he's a real sharp guy. And, he reminds me a lot of Curtis Lofton in a lot of ways. He had the hip injury last year, and it kind of derailed.
Better sideline to sideline than Lofton, huh?
He's a little bit better cover guy than Lofton. Now, Lofton's a thumper.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it'll be interesting to see how well he comes back from the injury, but there's a lot of similarities between Ellerbe and Lofton. And I know one of the things that Ed told me was that he did a great job of diagnosing plays for the Ravens because it's all about nada, tying up the middle, and you got to get to that point because he's going to tie up the blocker, but you got to make the tackle.
Yes.
And he said, he filled in for Ray Lewis, and he did one whale of a job, and that team went to the Super Bowl.
Right, and that's how he got the contract.
That's how he won the Powerball.
Right, no doubt.
And the 3rd-round pick, you pick a guy in the 5th round, you get a 3rd round in exchange for him.
That's value.
Now, but here's the deal. You got to make that 3rd-round pick count. You got to make it count.
How big of a loss is Stills?
Ask me that in May when they finished free agency and the draft,
Right.
and I think it'll be a better call. One thing he did as a young player, he got open. He was a good route runner. He understood this scheme pretty well, and I thought he was a player that, if focused, could be a really good player in this league. And it's interesting, Miami takes him, and then they deal Mike Wallace off to Minnesota.
Yes.
So, in essence, you know, you get rid of a guy that didn't fit what you wanted. He wasn't happy in Miami. You trade him to Minnesota, and he's a better fit there because of Bridgewater.
Yes. C.J. Spiller, your thoughts?
You know, I like C.J. a lot.
I like him too.
Can he stay healthy? Is, I think, the big issue here. One of the things, when you look at the way Peyton's system is built around, it's built around throwing the ball to the tight end, throwing the ball to the back, coming out the backfield, having that mismatch downfield. He had it early on with Reggie. Reggie gave you that speed element. Sproles was a quickness guy. You know, nobody could, you know, he was just impossible to cover one-on-one downfield. But CJ's got another gear that he can kick it into. The thing I like about it is he's been playing in Buffalo, cold weather games. Now he comes indoors. 8 games every year in the Dome. 1 game in Atlanta in the Dome. More than likely you'll get other games in there where you'll play 10 or 11 in the Dome on a fast track. That's where he's effective. Can you keep him healthy? He had the shoulder injury last year, but he's always been a guy that has had a little bit of a nick and a scrape, so to speak. He's like a track speedster that, you know, muscle pull, quad, thigh. You hope that he can stay healthy. He could put up numbers similar to what Bush did. I mean, as a runner and a receiver, because of what he brings to the table. And you think about that 3-headed monster now running back with Ingram, Kyrie Robinson, the power guy. Now you got the speed guy with C.J. Spiller. But his element of coming out the backfield, Eric, I think that's the big key for this offense.
And he can run inside. He can run the football.
Yeah, he's a pretty good inside runner, but his real forte is getting and cutting that corner, and also, too, when he gets out the backfield, that linebacker, that safety's in trouble. I mean, because nobody's going to be able to match up with him well downfield. This system is tailor-made for him, really tailor-made for him to excel. Now let's keep him healthy.
Mike, I'm watching cornerbacks come off the free agent board, $7-8 million for mid-level cornerbacks, and I'm thinking the Saints are being outpriced out the market. All of a sudden, they go out and get a guy they even tried to get last year in Brandon Browner. Again, 31, maybe, what is he, 32? 31?
He's going to be 31.
He'll be 31 when the season starts, but big guy. Obviously, he's a very, very physical player. What are your thoughts on Brandon Browner? They get him for $5 million a year.
Man, you look at, you know, my old buddy Tremont Williams. Man, he signed $7 million bucks. God bless him. The last time he got that $45 million contract, you know, he went to Assumption. He lives in Labadie. He lived in Labadie. I said, man, you could almost buy Labadie for $45 million at this stage. But, you know, and he signs a 3-year deal for $21 million with the Browns.
Yes.
So that's a lot of money. You know, Brandon, you take the good and the bad with him. He fills that cavernous need at cornerback. Rare that you get a 6'4" cornerback. Long arm, great wingspan, physical, aggressive, brings a certain almost like aura around him that, you know, I've been to back-to-back. I won 2 Super Bowls back-to-back with 2 different teams, physical style. But on the other part, the way the rules are today, and he's grabby and pushy and shovey and that sort of thing, that they're calling it more. So he's become a magnet for penalties going his way. He'll make some big plays, he'll give up some, he'll get penalized, but it is Mount Everest better than what you had before at that cornerback position. The other thing about him, too, is, and what I love about Browner is, all those years he played opposite Richard Sherman. And his deal is, man, you know, I know they ain't throwing the ball at Richard, they throwing it at me. Last year he goes to New England, they have Darrelle Revis. So guess what? They ain't throwing the ball at Revis either. So he's used to having teams target him, and he knows he's not going to win all those battles, but it doesn't affect him mentally. I think for some young players, it's a mental part of, man, why are you picking on me? And again, I go back to Ed Reed. He always used to make this line, they break you down mentally, and then they break you down physically. They don't care about your credentials. Credentials, and you leave that at the door. They're coming after you. I don't care what you got. And basically, Browner's feeling is, well, come bring it, because I got something for you, too. I thought it was a great move to bring in Browner. I thought, as you said, at that price, they got him. When you look at what some of the other corners got, they got him at a good price. And he's a 2-year guy. You understand he's a two-year guy. But you know what? If I'm Sean Payton, you know, I want Mickey to worry about winning in 16 and 17. Man, I'm worried about what's going to happen in 2015 because my deal's on the line for this.
Sure. Curtis Lofton is released. He re-signs with Oakland. Pierre Thomas is released. Last year we heard buyer's remorse on releasing so many players who had obviously were vested in the Payton way, were leaders in the locker room. They bring in some guys that obviously are leaders in Unger and Browner. Do you think the Saints worried about that leadership situation at all?
I'm worried about chemistry on a team. Again, I go back to what Pete Carroll said. You know, leadership, that comes by winning. You got a lot of young players that should be leaders on this team that haven't taken that step yet. You know, you one of the better players on this team, you got to be a leader. By what you do on the field or what you say to another young player. I think last year, what had probably aggravated the coach more than anything was that you were having older players that weren't taking that leadership role, weren't leading that younger player down the right path. You know, and you got to make a change. You got a one-time shot with it. Because if you didn't change it this year, Eric, you'd have had a difficult time if you'd have swung another 6-10, 7-9 year. Again, guess what? You know, the natives are going to be restless.
You better believe it.
Because you've set the bar high. You've set it extremely high on that sport. So you got to find chemistry. I think more than anything in the locker room, chemistry, to have those guys play as a team. And sometimes that comes with young players. Man, who gave Russell Wilson the nod? Isn't he the guy that kind of set the tone with Seattle? Is Marshawn Lynch the leader in the locker room there? Come on, he's a great player. Yes. But, you know, he kind of does what he wants to do.
Right. Mike, they had that type of leadership in 06. They had that type of chemistry in 06.
And 09.
And that's what propelled them to the Super Bowl. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV with a rebroadcast on Friday nights. 2 chances to catch it. Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette at 9 p.m. and right back here on WLAE at 10 p.m. each and every Friday night. Mike Detillier of WWL Radio is our guest. Of course, Mike Detillier's draft report as well. We'll be coming back to the phone lines when we come back from our break. 866-3200 is the phone number. My name is Eric Asher. Don't go anywhere.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by.
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Just one guest tonight on our panel. Mike Detillier joins us from WWL Radio and Mike Detillier's draft report. Mike, before we go to the phone lines, one more time, how folks can get the draft report?
They can go on to saintsreport.com, also MikeDetillier.com.
And, of course, it'll be out by
around 7th or 8th of
7th April. Let's head to the phone lines. 866-3200. Any questions for Mike Detillier? Let's go to Elliot on the West Bank. Elliot, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for holding.
How you doing, sir?
Elliot?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, bro. This is the Super Bowl, but
one more time, sir. You broke up on us.
Some people say the same Super Bowl in 2009.
Said
they got to the Super Bowl by luck.
Got to the Super Bowl by luck?
Elliot.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, well, thanks for the phone call. I'm going to let Mike answer that question, although I totally disagree with you, but go ahead.
No, listen, I'd rather be lucky than good if that's the case. Now, I know a lot of lucky rich guys in this world, and I'm not saying I'm rich, but I'm comfortable.
Right.
And so I've been lucky. And listen, a lot of people, you got to have some talent, but also have a little bit of luck. That football team was talented in 09. It was talented. Did breaks go your way? Absolutely. But every team who wins a Super Bowl, they have a little bit of football good fortune go their way. Look at Seattle to get to where they were. How could they have won that game against Green Bay? I mean, Green Bay did everything in that game but win it.
Right.
So if you're talking about luck, man, they were lucky to be in the Super Bowl. And then you look at New England. They won the Super Bowl. How many times can you get down to the 1 foot line and you got the best power runner in pro football and you take a chance and throw the football? Right. Listen, Elliot, I understand what you say sometimes about luck, and there is luck in everything in life. But they didn't win that Super Bowl just by luck in 09.
DJ is in New Orleans. DJ, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric, Mike.
How you doing, DJ?
Okay. Look, statement. I heard a mock draft the other day from NBC, and they went through the whole 32 teams, and Lionel Collins wasn't anywhere to be found. Now, that being said, if he is available at 13, and a couple other players maybe that they've targeted are available, wouldn't it be best for them to move down 2 or 3 spots maybe and still be able to get either Collins or somebody else that they've targeted? And I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah,
thank you, DJ.
Yeah, DJ, that's a good comment. Now, listen, some of these mock drafts and who put them out, last year I got a lot of criticism because I put Odell Beckham in the top 20. He went in some draft at this time, and he wasn't even in the first round.
Yes.
And he ended up being the highest drafted LSU player in the history of LSU Tiger. I mean, so it goes to show you that, depends on who's putting out these mock drafts. All I know is one of the teams that pick in the top 10, their director of player personnel told me last week, La'el Collins is the top-ranked offensive lineman on their board. So, you know what? It's not a homer pick by any stretch because, you get that. Oh, you say, no, listen, I don't care if he was at Montana Tech or Southern Connecticut. I know one thing. He is a really good football player, and he's a first-round pick guy. He's not lasting to the second round by any stretch of the imagination. But, you got people that put out these mocks, you just kind of scratch your head about what they're thinking of and what they're doing, too. So, not to be critical, but that's what you got to have. La'el Collins is a top 20 pick in this draft class.
Definitely.
What I do agree with you on, if you could fall back and obtain an extra pick or two, I would be all for that. Exactly for that.
Yes, because you've already mentioned, as we open the show, a tremendous amount of talent between the second and fourth round, right?
Right.
Go ahead, if you would, reiterate.
21, I think it's either 21 or 22 guys that are legit first-round picks. But from 23 all the way on into the 60s, I'll tell you what, the numbers are tight into that. That's where I want my picks at. Just kind of steal a page of what you did, or just look back at what Jimmy Johnson did with Dallas, what Bill Walsh did in San Francisco, trading, getting all those picks and having that signature draft where you can get 5, 6, 7 players that they're the building blocks of the future of not only 15, but 16, 17, 18. Just remember, this team has been stripped of 2 second-round picks, Bounty Gate.
Crushing.
A third-round pick you traded last year to move up to get Brandon Cooks. You gave up a first and a second-round pick for Mark Ingram. You gave up a fourth-round pick this year in the Jimmy Graham trade. So all those picks you have to hit, and last year was a complete whiff of the draft with the exception of Brandon Cooks.
Jeff is in Avondale. Jeff, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, how y'all doing today?
All right, Jeff.
My question is, who you think the Saints going to pick at 13? And I'm kind of all for one of the big wide receivers because Colston getting older and everything. What do you think of that? And I know Mike's all into the draft. So
thank you, Jeff. Listen,
Thanks, Jeff.
if Amari Cooper or Kevin White was there, I'd pick him in a heartbeat.
Who do you like better?
I actually have Amari Cooper ranked.
I like Cooper as well.
But it's close with me now. Kevin's been just kind of a one-year player at West Virginia. Man, I know one thing with Amari Cooper. I mean, he tilted the field every time he was out there. He tilted the field. Now, Kevin White, it would not be shocking to me that he gets picked ahead of him because of who's picking at 4, and that's the Raiders. And what they love is a speed guy. Amari is one of these silky smooth route runners, catch the football, make something happen after the catch. Kevin is a lightning strike and a big physical guy. I love both of them as players, but I really have Cooper ranked ahead of Kevin White. If one of those two guys are there, I wouldn't have a problem in picking a receiver at 13. But, you know, Devontae Parker, people have brought him up, and he's close. Mm-hmm. He's in that range of player. I think this team, when you look at how the draft is cut, sitting there at 31, a very early second, you might have a shot at some pretty good receivers there. Sammy Coates is a guy, too. And everybody feels a little bit different about Sammy.
Right.
Big physical receiver, great speed. Man, look like, you know, he's built like what you want a receiver. Mm-hmm. Now, he's had some issues sometimes with dropsies. This guy's averaged over 21 yards a catch the last 2 years at Auburn. Look who's throwing him the football. Nick Marshall.
Yeah.
Just think if he had a quarterback that would really kind of hum it to him. And so, you know, those are some of the guys to look at. But I would be surprised if they picked a receiver at 13 just because I don't think Cooper or Kevin White is going to be there at 13. If they were, that card's in.
Right.
I'm picking them.
Strengths of the draft.
Strength of the draft, offensive line's pretty good this year.
Interior or outside?
At guard and at tackle.
Okay.
Decent year at wide receiver. Not as good as last year.
Not
but
as good depth as last year?
Depth-wise as last year. It couldn't be.
Man.
It couldn't be. Tight end, I would say it's above average. One signature guy, Max Williams, signature player, big-time guy. Quarterback position, man, once you get past Winston and Mariota, Bryce Petty's going to be a late first, early second, but then it's a huge drop-off after that. Running back core, one of the best I've seen in a long time. Really deep at the running back position. Pass rush outside linebackers, really good in that area. Got a lot of depth there. Decent defensive end, but a lot of defensive tackles and a lot of inside linebackers.
Right.
Cornerback, average group. Safeties, way below average. So the strengths for me would be defensive tackle, edge pass rushers, inside linebackers. Now, offensive line, depending on where you're going to play them, inside, guard or tackles, but good there. Great group of running backs.
Mike, a couple things. Number one, according to Michael Bailey of Roto World, after the Jimmy Graham trade, that the Saints were listening to offers for Drew Brees. I don't think they were shopping Drew Brees, but I'm sure some people called them and said, "Hey, are you willing to move with Drew Brees?" In this week's Monday Morning Quarterback with Peter King, the gentleman who founded OverTheCap.com laid out a scenario where he believes Drew Brees will be traded next year. The Saints will not be able to afford him next year, and this will be the kind of breaking point for New Orleans and Drew Brees. What are your thoughts?
As far as 2015 is concerned, he's a New Orleans Saint. Now, what happens after that, because of age, money, everything else, everything's up in the air. Do you try to renegotiate that contract, get a little cap help there, or whatever? Those last 2 years, monumental numbers there. So one thing's got to happen, Eric. Either you're going to have to extend him,
right,
or look for a partner somewhere. But for 2015, he's here.
Right.
And my thing about it is, some of these trade rumors about being traded to Tampa Bay. Why would Tampa Bay give up the first pick in the entire draft for a 36-year-old quarterback? That's not going to happen.
Right.
And if you're the Saints and you're looking at Jameis Winston, he got in all kind of trouble in Tallahassee, Florida.
What's he going to do?
What he's going to do here?
Right.
Everybody says, well, he met with Sean. Well, you know why? Man, if I'm Sean Payton, I think I'm going to have to play him twice a year. Why wouldn't I pick his brain and figure out a little bit how he ticks as a player? Because I'm going to have to go up against him twice a year for maybe quite some time, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. Why wouldn't I want to know everything about him as a kind of almost like a human being? Why wouldn't I want to know what makes him tick? But if I'm the Saints and I'm looking at that and thinking, there's no way. I mean, for 2015, he stays here. I do agree with that part about 2016 is a critical year. On either the extension happens or you may have to cut.
You may get some cap help if you extend him with a favorable deal, but I think a lot of it depends on how he plays this season.
Well, sure.
You beef up the interior of the offensive line. You give him the tools that are necessary to be successful, a Spiller coming out the backfield. Maybe go out and get another receiver that's going to help him there. And more importantly, protect him, because I think a lot of the problems last season was trying to do too much under duress. Let's see how he plays then, see how much of a quarterback, how well he plays if he's still a top-notch quarterback, which I believe he is, and then you make that decision. With that said, though, Mike, does that mean the Saints look at quarterback at some point in this draft this year?
I think you have to somewhere. But I would be surprised if it was early. I really do. My thing about Drew Brees is just take money off the table. I'll play him till the wheels come off the cart. You know, I mean, you know what? Here's my thing, and I really believe this full-heartedly. 5 years from now, the NFL is totally different. Drew Brees is out of the league in 5 years. Peyton Manning's out of the league in 5 years. Tom Brady's out of the league in 5 years. Put 5 years on Ben Roethlisberger. Put 5 years on Phillip Rivers, on Aaron Rodgers. Tony Romo's out of the league. Where are the quarterbacks coming from? The spread has changed college football world, but it's going to change the professional world. Those guys at Oregon and Baylor and wherever they run in the spread, man, I'm not worried about the NFL. I'm worried about winning games in my system that's helping me win. Let the NFL worry about the quarterback issue. Only thing, Eric, I'm telling you, that's a huge void. And in 5 years, this game's going to be totally different from a pitch and catch standpoint. You're looking at a golden age of quarterbacks you're not going to see again for a long time. Because all I see down the road, Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson. Name me another top-flight young quarterback in the NFL today that you say, you know what, 5 years from now, that guy's it. You'd have a difficult time coming. You say, well, maybe Blake Bortles at Jacksonville, maybe Teddy Bridgewater, maybe Derek Carr, maybe.
Right.
All I know is Wilson and Luck are there. But you look down the road, you're talking about a dramatic change in the NFL. You look what's going to happen here in 5 years.
Cam Jordan, $6.9 million against the cap. They took that fifth-year option on him. There were rumors that, again, when the Saints started this trading frenzy, that they were dangling him out there. The Giants were very close to biting. Do you think, first of all, Cam Jordan will be here this year? And if you do, obviously this is a contract year for him. I'm of the opinion he's going to play his butt off this year. And
for anybody.
No, I don't care who it's for, because he's playing for that next deal. Your thoughts?
I think, guys play hard in that contract.
They do.
There's no question about it. Listen, no matter how you cut it, it is done that way. They really play hard. What bothered me last year was his inconsistency, in which he, at some games, looked like the Cam Jordan we had saw the year before. Other games, he wasn't around. So, that's going to be a big financial deal for the Saints, one way or another. If you decide that you're going to keep him, that's a big financial deal. And do you play him as a one-year guy and see what happens and then figure out the contract? Or do you trade him now and get some value? It depends on what's offered. I think that's the big thing. What gets offered back in return for Cam Jordan more than anything? I think that's the big crux to this. I think they would trade him, to be honest, if they had the right compensation for him.
Yes.
Because I think everybody other than Brandon Cooks, Drew Brees for 2015, everything's on the board.
9 picks in this draft so far. This could obviously expand if they make some more deals, which, again, a lot of people are believing they will. What is it, 5 picks in the first 78?
Yep.
Your thoughts on how they approach this draft? Is it bundle some picks to get up and get one particular player, or is it, as you've said, the meat of this draft is from 21 to 60, and that's where you're going to get a lot of, at least some decent quality players?
Yeah, my thing about bundling picks is you've had so many picks kind of taken away, traded off, that you've missed on. Man, you shouldn't be bundling picks. You should be accumulating draft choices. This is a team that's not 1 or 2 players away. You've got multiple needs across the board here. So I would keep those draft choices, as many of them as I could, because I do think that when you get that core of young players that have kind of been through the fire and you have other veterans around them, if you get the right picks, it works for you. You can build off of that. And again, I go back to what happened in 06. That has catapulted this team from 06 up until last year to the heights that they've hit. The greatest run ever in Saints history. When you look at what they did in the offseason those years, that's what brought them to that point. You got to have, a repeat. You got to go back to doing what you did in 06, do it again in 2015, and hope that it will work out.
Well, and Mike, again, when you look at this team right now, $22 million in dead money. It will grow depending on what's going to happen with any more maneuvers that they do leading up to the draft and beyond. You got to get young, you got to get athletic, and you got to get cheap.
You know what? You can only, what's amazing is you probably got 7 or 8 guys that eat up, about 75% of your, salary cap.
It's much better now than it was, but yes.
But now, you need those young players because of what it's not going to cost you. What it's not going to cost you down the line. So, what's happened here, I think we've kind of got lost in the mix, is that there have been so many misses on draft day that you put yourself in this spot where 2015 is critical. It's the crossroads season for you to get that group of young players. You did it a year ago. I thought they did a really good job a year ago bringing in a good mix of talent. Not only that, some of the veteran, say undrafted free agents that you were able to get in. At that time, it was 7 that you brought in. That's a pretty high number. I think you got to have another repeat season like that of off season to bring and rejuvenate this football team. It's got to get younger. You can't just win by veteran free agency. Yes. You look at the top teams of how they've won, it's always a mix and a match. And I don't think anybody, when I look at the success of Bill Belichick in New England, does anybody get more out of scuffed player? A guy that's, you know what, he's down and out. This is his last shot. You know what, I'm giving all out for Bill, because you know what, if I can't play in New England, I ain't playing anywhere. And he gets all these draft choices, and he misses on as many as he hits. He's not perfection on this, but he gets the most out of those scuffed players.
And he accumulates a lot of those picks.
And he accumulates them.
Right.
That's the key. I see the same thing in Seattle, which they've won. They've hit on a few free agents, but mostly John has done a great job of drafting guys that fit what Seattle does. And he gave me a great line a couple years back at the Senior Bowl. He's, man, I don't care, you know, what Green Bay thinks about my pick, or New Orleans or Minnesota. I'm picking for Seattle. I'm picking for my team.
Right.
And a lot of times he says, I think general managers are worried about what somebody else thinks about their pick. He says, I don't care. My thing is to build my team my way, and if it doesn't work out, I get rid of them. You just think about what Seattle has done. They made a bad deal for Percy Harvin, gone, and quickly.
Yes.
So, you know, you're going to make mistakes. Nobody's infallible in this world to do it. But I think to keep a mistake around, that's where you make the mortal sin.
Right. I want to get back to mistakes in a moment, but you mentioned something about scuffed players, and I love that description of a player, because that's what made the Saints run to the Super Bowl. A lot of guys that were told, you can't play in this league.
You think about Shanley, Fujita.
Go right down the line.
And Jaron Sharper.
Yes.
All those guys were kind of told, you know what, you're done.
Right.
You can't play anymore. You got to get to stepping, so to speak, in this world. They wanted to show everybody they still could play. Jeff Fain, he didn't get to the Super Bowl, but he was part of that group. Even Drew Brees, to a certain extent.
Yes, that's true, because he was. Look,
you think about 06.
San Diego told him, look, we're going with a younger player. Miami said, we're not going to sign you, and all of a sudden, he's in New Orleans. Pierre Thomas, undrafted free agents, and some of those guys. So they had a different type of player.
Lance Moore.
Yes.
Even Jeremy Shockey almost kind of played like the chip on his shoulder. Now, he was a guy that was constantly, I'm always open, when he wasn't.
Sure.
But that was part of his makeup. David Thomas was like that. He was traded from New England there. So you look at how this football team was pieced together. A young Jonathan Goodwin, part of that group there.
Right.
But scuffed players, and there are a lot of them in this league that have been scuffed. It's not Rick Venturi had a line with me over the offseason. He's like, listen, Mike, nobody does it better than Belichick. He has that ability to do it. But he says, I find outside the coaching world that I'm out now, and he's in the world like you and I today, is to get that guy, not that the fall breaks him, but it's how you pick him up that he can help you. And he's worried about that because, you know what? Most of the time, he doesn't have anything else. This is everything for him to get that second and third and fourth chance. A lot of times, too, a scuff player has a lot to do with injury. And a lot of times, you break down physically, and boy, Eric, you see more and more in this world. Young players leaving this game, much less now the older players. For some guys, you got to rip that uniform off of them. They will not leave until you rip it off of them. But now today, they got some younger guys that'll take the walk. Jake Locker, similar situation. Yeah. So
unusual.
It's a different world than how we grew up and how we looked at the NFL. But I do think that ability to draft well is first and foremost how to build a football team. But secondly, it's about finding that 3 or 4 guys that somebody else really didn't want, and they play great for you.
Yes.
They may not fit somewhere else, but they play great for your scheme.
Yeah, I'm with you. Which leads me to my next question, Mike. Obviously, 06, they hit on the draft. 13, they hit on the draft. We've already talked about an average of 2 players in every other draft that made this team. They got away from getting those scuffed players on this franchise. one has to begin to question, why Peyton and Loomis moved away from what made them successful as head coach and general manager. The way that they've handled the cap, okay, trying to be able to get one more championship while Drew Brees had a window of opportunity open. Now it's kind of blowing it up and starting all over. Why should the fan base believe that these guys can turn it around?
Well, because you saw it in 06 in a lot worse situation. You were DOA as a football team. Listen, that was a lot tougher.
Oh, there's no doubt.
The great story when 20 years from now, when they're going to write about the Saints, is not the 09 season. It's the 06 season. Yeah. Just look where you were. Mm-hmm. You were rock bottom. Right. And you came within one game of the Super Bowl. Eric, that's the greatest success story you could look at of how bad you were and then to swing that around in 1 year. So I think that's part of the changes, too, when you look at scouting. To bring in Jeff Ireland, maybe things got stale there in that part. And we all know one thing. Sean's got his fingerprints and Paul Prince on every player that comes in and out of this organization. But you need somebody, too, that's got a good eye for talent. Now, Jeff did not make it as a GM. He was lousy in Miami. He was a really good scout in Dallas. He was a really good scout in Dallas. And now he's got another opportunity. You know what? He's a scuffed guy executive.
Yes.
This is an opportunity for him to pick himself up and get another shot at it in this league. He's still a young man to do it. And he had great success with the Cowboys picking players, not so great success in Miami. Now he's got another opportunity here with a team that does have a good group of players to build upon. But what you got here is a chance that lightning strike again come draft time.
Is Raphael Bush a luxury?
Not for me. On this team, when I look at it, you got Bird coming back from a back injury. Kenny Vaccaro, he was in the Witness Protection Agency last year, didn't play well at all.
A very inexpensive Pierre Warren.
Yeah, so why would I get rid of Raphael Bush at this stage? I mean, to me, he's more valuable to me than he is to someone else.
But he is a tradable asset.
He is a tradable asset, but my thing about it is, when I look at the safety position, that's not a strength on my football team. You might say on paper, oh, yeah, Kenny Vaccaro, Jarvis Bird, Pierre Warren. Yeah, you think so, but what happens if one of them gets hurt? And what happens if this happens? Then, what happens if Kenny doesn't come back from his sophomore slump? What happens if Bird has the back issue again? Then where are you?
Right.
You've traded away your tradable asset, and now you've got another hole at the safety position. I wouldn't deal off Raphael Bush. I think he fits this system very well in what Rob Ryan wants. One of the things Rob really needs on this football team, though, other than I've talked about it so many times at cornerback, he needs an ace pass rusher. He needs a guy that can put the fear of God in you when he's coming off the edge. If I'm playing the Saints, I'm playing that front seven, there's nobody there that I stay up late at night if I'm an offensive coordinator trying to figure out who to block. Just think about it. Other teams have that player. Other teams have that guy.
They thought Gillette was that guy, which leads me to my next question. What's the future of Junior Gillette on this team? I said it last week, better drop to his knees, and thank God that he had the guaranteed
contract.
Roster bonus, because if not, he would have been gone.
My thing about Junior is he's a good pass rusher, but if I'm running the football, I'm running it right at him.
Oh, yes.
I'm running it right at him. So one thing he does do good is rush the quarterback. Okay, but he doesn't play the run well. And what that tells me is he's a one-year guy here. He's a one-year player, and you better find yourself a guy that can come off the edge and give you pressure. Cornerbacks can make your defensive linemen look better today. And people wouldn't think that before. All I know is I see Seattle. I can name you Michael Bennett. You know what? There's other guys. Bruce Irvin's pretty good at times, and other times not so much. Cliff Averill been okay. But you know what makes him good?
That back end.
Richard Sherman, Brandon Browner, Brian Maxwell turned that into a huge deal. Guess what happened when one of those cornerbacks, when Jeremy Lane went down? Man, they went after Terrell Simon like he had stole something from him when he was 6 years old.
That's right.
Man, they went after him with a vengeance. I look at New England last year. What was the big part of that team that was different? They bring in Darrell Revis, Brandon Browner. Devin McCourty has a great season, natural spot at the free safety spot. It made those defensive linemen with the Patriots look a lot better.
I want to shift gears for a moment. We got about 3 minutes left in the show. I want to talk about the LSU quarterback situation. Mike, they're in spring practice right now. We're hearing rave reviews about what's going on with the quarterback position. Mike, what are you hearing?
Listen, I'll see it to believe it. You know, I really believe that Brandon Harris is the future of this football team. I've seen enough of Anthony Jennings to know that he can't throw the ball accurately enough on a consistent basis, I should say, to get you back to an SEC championship game. Brandon Harris has those skills. Man, you got all that talent at wide receiver. The thing I want to watch early for LSU is the offensive line makeup. I tell you, I was the strength last year, this football team. It wasn't early on, but boy, at the end it was. How that makeup is, because I know one thing, early on, I got to run the ball. Because I've got to protect my young quarterback, build up a little confidence in him.
You got a stable of backs to do it.
You got some great backs.
Oh, yeah.
You got some, and listen, Leonard Fournette is a superstar player. Yes. And he's got a chance to win the Heisman somewhere down the line. But wait till you get a shot at Geis, who's a bigger, faster version of Terrence McGee. And he's going to give you big-time playmaking skills. Those receivers, offensive line, I think will be good. It's all about the quarterback issue. Can Brandon settle down? Now, people say, well, Johnny Manziel did this as a freshman. Marcus Mariota did this as a freshman. No, he did it as a redshirt freshman, which meant he watched for a year. Brandon didn't. Well, he watched, but when they put him in the game, man, you know, he was like a deer in the headlights. He has got to be able to calm himself down.
Can he?
I think he can. He's got the skill set to do that. He's got the arm. He's got the accuracy skills. We saw it in flashes, certainly against Mississippi State, that he's got that factor that he can come back and win you or get you close to winning games. But it's doing it consistently, Eric. I think that's the key. And I look at the SEC, look at what's won for them. For Alabama to get to the Final Four with Blake Sims at quarterback is amazing, because you didn't know what you were going to get out of him from week to week.
Mike, what scares me, though, is the scuttlebutt coming out of Baton Rouge that they've had to pare the playbook down for Brandon Harris. Man, you came in as an early entry. You've had a chance to be in the program now for a year and a half. You should know the playbook at this point. It shouldn't be a situation where they're paring it down. Is this something, again, that, you know, hopefully the kid can grasp? Yeah, you would hope so. The other thing about condensing the playbook, you know what that tells me? Get the heat off me as a coach. I'm telling you. No, listen, you understand. You're not the first one. You understand the logic here. Get off me on this here. I've got to pare it down for him. So I don't want to take the heat. I don't want to take the heat for this at all. So I throw it on the player. I'm not throwing him under the bus, but boy, he's pretty close to the tracks on here. I do think Harris is the guy that's going to be a really good starting quarterback for LSU. The one thing with him, though, he is a gunslinger, and you cannot get that out of his blood. It is something in him that he is going to take chances, and that is going to drive less up the wall. He wants a guy that's going to do what he wants, when he wants. That is not Brandon. He is going to take chances throwing the football downfield. That may be the condensed part of the playbook more than anything. Mike, it's been a great hour. Thank you, Eric. Thanks so much for being with us. Mike Detillier of WWL Radio, MikeDetillier.com, SaintsReport.com. Early April, his draft guide will be out. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLE at 10 p.m. And now, also on Pelican Sports Television at a new time in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets at 9 p.m. Don't forget, you can catch me on the radio weekdays 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on WGSO 990 a.m. You can also listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com, and the TuneIn Radio app is a great way to take my show with you anywhere. If you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can check those out at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to Mike Detillier, also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juno, Philip Williamson, Amanda Lyons, and my director, William Hill. New Orleans, have a great evening. We'll see you right back here next week for Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching.